With Magic the Gathering's newest set, Tales of Middle-earth, the Lord of the Rings Magic the Gathering crossover coming out in less than a week, I want to talk about not the best commanders in the set, but actually the best card in each color to put into your commander and, by extension, historic Brawl decks. If you're not familiar with this set yet, there's a crossover set. It is Magic the Gathering cards featuring Lord of the Rings, characters, places, equipment, items, all sorts of amazing things that are so packed full of flavor. I feel like I could make an entire video that's just about my favorite flavor in the set, but no, I'm here to talk about the goods. This set is releasing into Modern in Paper Magic, which means it will be legal in Modern and also some of the other older formats like Vintage, Legacy, and Commander. And in Arena, it's going to be released into Alchemy, which I'm sure somebody out there plays. But more importantly, it's going to also be legal in Historic and Historic Brawl. Historic Brawl, of course, being the format I play way too much of. I love Historic Brawl so much. And there are some fantastic cards for Commander in this set. I'm a really very satisfied player actually looking at a lot of these cards because so many of them feel like they fill a void where I wanted a card. Now I have a card. I can put them into my decks. But a few of them feel like some real standouts. So in this video, I want to talk about the top card in each color that you can just put in a deck. Now, a lot of cards are build around, so you really need to have something specific going on with them, or you need to have them play nicely with your commander. These 5 cards, no, these are just the goods because everybody loves the good stuff. Sometimes you have 99 cards and you just want to fit in one more. Not me. I'm much more of a, I have 150 cards and now I have to cut 50 of them kind of deck builder. So let's start going in Wooburg order. That's going to be white, blue, black, red, green. About the best cards in Tales of Middle-earth. Starting with white, I've actually picked out a card that has white right in the name. Flowering of the White Tree. Flowering of the White Tree is a legendary enchantment that buffs up your entire board, but gives a little bit of an extra oomph to your legendaries. Yeah, like your commander. That's the big one. Flowering of the White Tree is a 2-mana legendary enchantment that gives all your creatures +1/+1, but gives your legendary creatures +2/+1 and Ward 1 instead. That's really nice because, yeah, Ward 1, that's not a big tax, but it is a tax. If your opponent would, say, like to bolt your legend, oh, well, you're not paying 1 mana for that spell, you're paying 2, and a lightning bolt turned into a lightning strike is a bit of a tax when you do it once, but it adds up over time because this sticks onto the battlefield and makes things a lot trickier for your opponent to deal with. Also, speaking of lightning bolts, that 1 additional toughness, ooh, you're not going to be bolting as many of my 3 toughness creatures when they start going up to 4 toughness. I do want to give an honorary shout out to 2 other cards in white. Lost to Legend, which is a piece of removal that actually tucks historic cards, yes, historic cards, back into libraries. If you're thinking, Amy, what do you mean historic cards? Historic, isn't that like the game mode in Arena? No, historic was the old mechanic from Dominaria a few years back that referenced legendaries, artifacts, and sagas, things that are of legend. So, you know, historic, not historic like Historic Brawl, the format that I play too much of. I also want to give an honorary shout out to Reprieve. This is being called the White Remand. It's not technically a counterspell, but it works a bit like one. It bounces a spell that's on the stack into its owner's hand, and you get to draw a card. Really great way to disrupt your opponent's game plan, and you're actually going to see my best card I've picked out for blue is a little bit like that too. It's Press the Enemy. Press the Enemy. My #1 card in blue is a, not quite a counterspell. For 4 mana at instant speed, you return a spell or non-land permanent an opponent controls to its owner's hand. It's kind of like a divide by 0 effect here, or a commit. Doesn't go into the library, goes back into hand. But then you can cast an instant or sorcery spell with a lesser mana cost. Being able to disrupt your opponent's game plan, even if it's temporary, to me, can be a really good way and a fair feeling way to mess up your opponent's game plan and give yourself a bit of advantage. And with this secondary advantage, Press the Enemy really shines. Press the Enemy, you could say, hit your opponent's Atali on the stack before it resolves. Oh, a nice big 7-mana creature. Do you have an instant or sorcery in your hand that costs less than 7? Maybe exactly 7? Maybe you're looking to draw some cards, do some burn. I don't know what colors you're in. Make your opponent discard as you return that thing back into your hand. Press the Enemy is versatile. It's fun. And I'm not going to say that it's my favorite card because, well, it's a blue card. It's just my favorite card in blue if you're trying to put in a generic card. And you know what? Blue decks, they got instants and sorceries. I know the way that you build decks. And also, I just didn't actually like blue that much in this set. It was my least favorite color during the set review. Now we're going to move on to black, which has an absolutely insane card that actually does go into even like splashes. Orcish Bowmasters. Orcish Bowmasters putting meat back on the menu. This 2-mana 1/1 has flash, so you can spring it on your opponent in response to their card draw. And why card draw? Because when your opponent tries to draw cards, anytime that's not their first draw during their draw step, you get to deal 1 damage to any target your opponent's face, their creatures, their planeswalkers. I don't know, maybe even a battle. That's pretty nice. But it doesn't end there. This wee little 1/1 also amasses. This builds up an army every single time your opponents are trying to draw extra cards. And that army is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. The fact that this is on a 2-mana, and it's only 1 and a black, so it's super splashable card, is insane to me. Also, if you want to, like, combo with this card, Peer into the Abyss, it's still a card. You can do it with Sheoldred. You can do it with, Kesa. Lots of cards do nicely with Peer into the Abyss, and Orcish Bowmasters, absolutely not an exception. This card is, I feel like, going to be one of those cards that's highly sought after. It feels a bit more fair than something like a Hull Breacher, but it does feel like the kind of card that in Commander, in Historic Brawl, is going to see a ton of play, and be the kind of card that people just stick in a deck, fill up a slot. It's a really good choice. It's time for red. Do y'all know Meathook Massacre? Well, this is red's Meathook Massacre. Spiteful Banditry. X in a red, you get to cast this enchantment. It sticks around, and it can get an effect whenever 1 or more of your creatures dies. But that X cost is also important because it deals X damage to each creature when it enters the battlefield. I mentioned it's kind of like a Meathook Massacre. That's why it's kind of like a Meathook Massacre. Now, whenever 1 or more of your opponent's creatures dies, you also get a treasure. Only triggers once each turn, sure. Only triggers once per your turn, your opponent's turn. If you're at a 4-player pod, each player's turn. That's a whole lot of treasure, and it's attached to a board wipe. This is great. I love this. It rewards you for removing things later in the game, too. You don't just need to kill things with burn now. Maybe you're running this in a red-black deck, and hey, you're going to be killing stuff if you're in red and black, because that's what Rakdos does. It kills things. Sometimes you're sacrificing your own stuff, but this cares about your opponent's things dying, and it adds up so fast. So many treasures for even more killitude. I love Spiteful Banditry. Now, there is a little thing I want to say before we show the green card, and the thing I want to say is I'm putting this in every deck. It's Delighted Halfling. Delighted Halfling is intended to be part of the Legends theme that's in this set because it's a 1-mana 1/2 that can tap for colorless mana or 1 mana of any color, only for legendary spells. Oh, but what's this? If you use that mana for a legendary spell, it can't be countered? Wizards of the Coast, I don't know what you were thinking with this card, but like, you're speaking my language. It's a happy-looking lady. She's a halfling citizen. This is a hobbit after my own heart. She's having so much fun. She's helping me cast all my spells until they don't get countered. Thank you, Delighted Halfling. I appreciate you making it so my commander and all my other legends don't get countered. I feel like this card actually does also have some potential for other decks that are not just, you know, commander. Delighted Halfling. It's like a 1-mana ramp spell. Birds of Paradise, Llanowar Elves. All these sorts of cards are quite good. And this one is a little bit more restricted because you can only use the colored mana to cast legends. But if you're like me, legends are a constant staple in your deck because you love a good legendary. I love a good legendary, and I can't wait to put Delighted Halfling into some decks. Now, those are just the 5 cards, 1 in each color, that I think are the big includes. I also want to give some other shout-outs, some honorary mentions to other cards, such as Mithril Coat. Mithril Coat is a flash, indestructible equipment that gives a creature indestructible. Oh, and it also attaches itself for free to a legendary creature when it enters the battlefield. So, like, you know, it's a combat trick, protects your commander by making it indestructible. It's really good. There's also a land cycle in this set of legendary lands. They're all pretty good, but they don't come in untapped unless you already have a legendary creature out, which means that they're kind of slow for early game. If you have like a 1-cost legend as your commander, maybe 2 costs, something like a Tiny Bones, then that's great. They all have good value attached to them. I feel like my least favorite of them is probably the blue one, Rivendell, because it makes you pay to scry to, but you can only activate it if you have a legendary creature. Whereas the red one, Mines of Moria, that one lets you just exile cards from your graveyard to make treasures. Sweet! Minas Tirith. I probably pronounce all these wrong. I did watch the Lord of the Rings movies again last week with Voxy. Does not mean I was paying attention to the pronunciation. I was writing emails half the time, just like making bad jokes. Anyway, the white one, it draws you cards in white. Heck yeah! But only if you attack 2 or more creatures this turn, which, like, if you're like me and you're in white, you're doing that anyway, so this one's pretty good. The green one makes food, but you have to tap a creature to do it. And for 2 mana tapping a creature, that's still not bad. I'll say the Shire is not going to see that much use outside of decks that are looking to make tokens. But if you're looking for just a land that makes tokens, it does the thing. It does the thing. And, I mean, I put this in a Chatterfang deck. That makes me happy. And the last one is Baradur. This one is, I think, the best of the cycle because you pay XX black to amass Orcs X. But you can only do it if a creature died. But it doesn't care whose creature died. I feel like anything that's able to make a large creature repeatably just as a mana sink that only cares about something that's going to happen pretty often, a creature dying, is pretty dang good. So you have like that flexibility of some of them are harder to activate, some of them have much better payoff, but I do think that land cycle is worth shouting out. Now, as for the other cards, oh, there's some spicy ones. So I want to just talk about, like, these are cards I'll be putting in my decks. Let's start with, like, a very generic one, Vial of Galadriel. It's a 3-mana legendary artifact that taps for mana of any color. Oh, a manalith, you say? Oh, it's more than a manalith, it's a mornemyth. Because if you would draw a card when you have no cards in hand, oh, I live in top deck city, so that's me all the time. Draw 2 instead. Does it care about if that's my draw from my draw step? No, it doesn't. This is just a good way to get more cards in your hand and do good things with those cards. It also has this weird, like, additional life gain ability that seems almost impossible to trigger if you're playing in Commander, because if you would gain life when you have 5 or less life, I'm dying if I have 5 or less life, gain twice as much life instead. I'm sure occasionally that will be relevant, but for the most part, it's about that extra bit of card draw on top of a manalith. I'm a person who plays budget mana rocks anyway, so for me, paying 3 mana for a mana rock is great. I'd probably remove a Celestis from some of my decks that don't have as much graveyard synergy to replace with Vial of Galadriel, especially my more aggressive decks where I'm just spitting out all the cards in my hand because you gotta be aggressive, be aggressive. Now, I want to put 2 cards together here because they work very nicely. The first is Witch King of Angmar, a 5-mana 5/3 flyer. A little bit weak on the backside, but it sure does pack a punch, and it can just sit there and hang out because whenever 1 or more creatures deals combat damage to you, each opponent sacrifices a creature that dealt damage to you this turn, and the Ring Tempts You. The Ring Tempts You is a ability that kind of adds up more value and stacks it up onto one of your creatures. Up to 4 different abilities get added up as part of the Ring Tempting You. Show that on the screen here is the Ring Tempting You. Also, you can make the Witch King of Angmar indestructible. So, like, bam. Awesome. I remember how I said it's, like, kind of weak, dies to a bolt. No, doesn't die to a bolt because you can discard a card to tap it, make it indestructible. Really nice. And it is a Wraith Noble, which leads me into my next big shout out card, which only really goes with the card I just mentioned, but it's really fun. I like cards that let me play extra copies, and this is the Nazgul. Plural. Nazgul is a 3-mana 1/2 with Death Touch. When it enters the battlefield, the Ring Tempts You. Ooh. And when the Ring Tempts You, you put a +1/+1 counter on each Wraith you control, and a deck can have up to 9 cards named Nazgul. Nice. So just like, you know, maybe Rat Colony's kind of too old and busted for you. Let's make some big Death Touchers instead. I'm not going to say Wraith Tribal is actually that strong. I just like these cards, and I wanted to talk about Nazgul if I was showing Witch King of Angmar, which is just the good stuff. Staying in black, Isildur's Fateful Strike is a sweet card, but I feel like you only want to play it if you either have a very well protected commander or a very inexpensive to cast commander. Isildur's Fateful Strike, a 4-mana legendary instant that destroys a creature, and if your opponent has more than 4 cards in hand, they have to exile cards until they only have 4 in hand. It's kind of cool to see that, like, hand attack tied to a kill spell. I really wish this said creature or planeswalker. It doesn't. That's okay. I'm going to put it in Tiny Bones anyway. I know it isn't technically discard, but 2-mana commander combined with 4-mana legendary instant equals fun. Sticking with black, but going into multicolored cards, yeah, you're going to notice I'm mentioning black a lot here. There's a lot of cards I like in black. What do you want from me? Ring Sight. This is a Dimir sorcery that has the ring tempt you, and then you tutor, but you only tutor for a card that shares a color with a legendary creature you control. Don't be like, Amy, I'm running demonic tutors in my deck. I got my vampiric too. I don't care. I don't own any of those cards. So here's a Ring Sight. I like it. Same color, same cost, probably a better card. Sauron's Ransom. 3-mana instant, choose an opponent. Eeny, meeny, miny. We're doing some politics here, or maybe I'm just picking the guy who's across from me because he's been making weird faces at me the entire night. Sauron's Ransom. That opponent looks at the top 4 cards of your library, puts them into 2 piles, 1 face up, 1 face down. You've probably seen this kind of effect before in these colors. It's really fun. You pick one of the piles, it goes into your hand, the other goes into your graveyard, and the ring tempts you. It's a little mini game. You get to have fun. You get to, like, goof around with your friends and be like, oh, which one do I want? And, like, maybe the person who's selecting the cards, like, shows it to the other person and is like, which of these do you think I should put in a pile? I really like the kind of, like, things that let your opponents work together both with and against you. I think it's a very fun card. And now we're going to move into another blue card. I know I said I didn't like blue that much in this set, but Horn Upon the Wind? It helps you do combos more. People like combos. 2-mana instant lets you cast spells this turn as though they had flash. Cool. Set stuff up on your opponent's end step. Draw a card. Nice. It's good. I like the Ley Line. I think it's called Ley Line of Anticipation. Also lets you cast things with flash. Hate playing against it. Hate it. Absolutely. But I do think that it's pretty cool. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you'd like to hear more about the cards from this set, tune in. I've got another video coming. And this time, it's about commanders. I know I said, like, I care about the cards that I'm going to put into the commander decks, not the commanders. No, I'm still going to talk about the cards to play as commanders. So just wait a couple days, maybe even just a few hours, and we're going to talk about the best commanders in Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth. See you soon!